Hi, and welcome to Freedom is Everybody's Job. I am your host, Mindy East. I'm joined today by three of my favorite Barron Ridge speakers. We have Gigi Sabbat out of Florida. We've got Tony Mattivi out of Kansas and Armando Neutel out of California. Welcome, everyone.
Hey, guys.
Such an honor.
I am so excited today. Armando, this is your first opportunity to be with us for a while. You've been traveling quite a bit. And so good to see you again. And Tony's back with us. Tony, I'm just going to let you kind of give our audience a little overview of who you are and what you do. And then we're going to discuss a very important topic today that I think will touch a lot of lives, either directly or indirectly, PTSD.
Yeah, okay, great. Thanks, Mindy. So I am a recently retired federal prosecutor. Before law school, I was a paramedic, and then I went off to law school and started a career in prosecution. I started out in the DA's office in Topeka, prosecuting speeding tickets, and worked my way up to murder cases. And then I worked in the Kansas Attorney General's office for a couple of years doing arson and explosives cases. And then I spent 22 years with the Department of Justice doing everything. I started out doing meth lab cases and then complex drug organization cases. And then in 2007, I deployed to Iraq as a civilian, and I worked on the war crimes trials there in Iraq. And from 2008 to 2013, I worked on the prosecution of the USS Cole bombing case against one of the detainees at Guantanamo that Osama bin Laden sent to Yemen to blow up the USS Cole. And then from 2013 to when I retired in 2020, I did the national security cases for the District of Kansas, including a number of fairly significant and high-profile cases that some of your viewers may have heard of. I retired in November of 2020 and sort of came full circle. I went to work for a healthcare company, and it's actually a company that I worked for as a young paramedic. So I'm a little bit surprised that when they knew me as this arrogant young paramedic, they would want me back as an old lawyer, but they did. So I've worked for MedCorps for the last 2 years.
Well, very good, very good. And Tony, you're right. You have had very high-profile cases. You were on the documentary that George Stephanopoulos produced called "The Informant: Fear and Faith in the Heartland," and
Right.
it was all about an individual by the name of
Dan Day.
And Dan was, he was just a regular guy who put his life on the line to save others. So you have taken that experience and built upon it. And you're a professional keynote speaker as well as everyone else on our panel.
Right.
So
yeah. I've really been fortunate to have the opportunity not just to work on those cases, but then to talk about them as well. Especially the Garden City case, which was a group of 3 militia members from Southeast Kansas who decided that they wanted to blow up an apartment building in Garden City filled with Somali Muslim refugees. And of all the high-profile cases that I had the privilege of working on, that's the one that I'm most proud of, because I really believe, had it not been for the courage of that informant, Dan Day, and the tenacity and professionalism of the FBI, the 2 FBI agents involved, I really believe that we would have ended up looking over the edge of a smoking black hole in Garden City filled with the bodies of more than 100 dead refugees. So I'm particularly proud of that one, and I'm really fortunate to have the opportunity to be able to talk about that and to talk about Dan in particular. I like to focus on Dan and his heroism and his courage and his patriotism, because I think there's a real inspirational message in there.
And as you said in the documentary with George Stephanopoulos, it would have been in another Oklahoma City.
There's no doubt.
Been catastrophic.
Yeah, there's no doubt it would have been another Oklahoma City.
Wow. Well, I'm going to let Armando. I'm going to let you open with some questions. And Armando is an author of The Decay of the Devil's Kingdom. Gigi, of course, has. They both have several books out. Gigi's latest book is God First. And then Gigi's also got an event today that's going to be available if anyone wants to join, and I'll let her talk about her gala that's coming up later this afternoon. But Armando, welcome back.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys. Since we have Tony here, I want to listen more from him on the PTSD and his experience, and what we have seen, because then I'll introduce some concepts of my own, let's say, research and see what their thoughts are. But maybe Tony can, how big is this problem? I believe, in the armed forces and police forces and stuff like that, that engaging in, harsh environments. I also was a military for 18 years, an officer of the Navy. And so today, as with your experience, what, how do you see this problem and how it's being addressed as in your mind?
Well, I think the short answer to your question is, I think it's being addressed a lot better now than it has been in the past. I think we're paying better attention to the people who have the problem. I think we're recognizing it quicker, earlier, and better. I think we're getting away from the stigma that it might have had in the past. And I can give you some specific examples of that. But I do think it's a big problem, but I also think that we as a society are handling it better than we ever have. That's not to say there's not room for improvement. I think we can always improve the way that we handle serious matters, especially post-traumatic stress. But I do think that one of the takeaways from this has to be we are doing a much better job with it than we ever have in the past.
What do you think the source of the problem is? And how do you think, is this problem known? Because I'm going to refer to a doctor, he's a psychiatrist, and Dr. Mary Ann. She says this: there is no single psychiatric drug out there that is going to fix this problem. Whatever it's distress or madness or PTSD, at best it will cover up the symptoms, she continues. At worst, it might kill you. So do you think that, the medicines are really helping people? I mean, I know you're not a doctor, I'm not a doctor, but that's what the psychiatrist is saying. I feel this problem is a more spiritual problem, but I want to listen what your experience and how does this, being addressed in the field. Yeah.
Well, I think that it's difficult. You asked a moment ago, what do I think is causing it? And the answer is, I think it's a different thing. There's a different cause in every person. I look back now on me as a young paramedic. I was in my early 20s, and we lost a couple of my colleagues to suicide during that time. Now, I don't know how much of it was PTSD driven and how much was just, a mental illness. I don't know, because I wasn't very aware at the time. We were operating in a very harsh environment. We faced physical threats every single shift. I wore a bulletproof vest as a paramedic because it was dangerous. And then I went to law school. I went to work as a prosecutor, and I became involved in law enforcement and with law enforcement. And it was easy to see that a lot of folks sort of suffered from that. But again, I wasn't paying attention to it as well as I do now. And I think I was kind of stereotypical. I don't think anybody was really paying attention to it then the way that we are now. When I really started to pay attention to it was when I was prosecuting the USS Cole bombing case, because we interviewed every single sailor on that who was on the ship at the time. And then we interviewed all the Marines who responded on the security team, every FBI agent, every NCIS agent who responded. And one of the things that I was noticing during these interviews is it seemed to me that every single sailor that I talked to who had been on the ship at the time had PTSD. And some of them I came to recognize masked it better than others. And I even met a couple that I thought, wow, there's somebody who managed to walk away with this without experiencing PTSD. And what I came to realize was they didn't avoid it at all. They were just better at hiding it. And so during that time, I started to do some research so that just to educate myself on how better to deal with these folks as witnesses. How should I treat them to be helpful? You know, when you sit down and talk with somebody about a traumatic incident as a prosecutor, you know, I felt like all I was doing was ripping open wounds, right? And I wanted to learn how to do that better. And so that's where I really started to pay attention. And one of the things I noticed is it was during that time period, you know, when the Cole happened, I don't think the military or the Navy in particular recognized how severe PTSD was. And they did things like, for example, some of the sailors, they turned around, the Navy turned around if they weren't injured and they put them right back on a ship. Some of them they put on exactly the same kind of ship, right? And so every single day they would see things, hear things, smell things that triggered reactions for them, that triggered their stress. I think now the Navy would never do anything like that. I think their thinking has evolved enough that they know better than to just turn around and put somebody right back on the same type category of ship. And I've seen things with, you know, the way that they will not just make counseling available like they did after the Cole, but actually mandate counseling and make sure people get into counseling after an event like that. So I do think I've kind of rambled on a little bit. I'll shut up and let you focus me with some questions if you want to, Armando. But I do think that there's been an evolution in our thinking and an evolution in how well we're treating folks who suffer from this, what can be a very, very devastating disorder.
Yeah, in fact, you know, I had some friends that had issues with this, and one of the things I'm not convinced is that medicines and you know, let's say what we called in the past the pharmakia industry or the pharma industry. What's your experience? Does the medicine work? Do you think the medicines make the things worse? What's your experience on this?
I'm not a doctor, and I don't play one on TV, and I didn't even stay at a Holiday Inn last night. So I'm really not qualified to talk about that. I think what I see is helpful to people. You know, one of the things about Dan Day, when Dan was our informant, I had to keep an arm's distance from him. And when he was a witness, I had to keep an arm's distance from him. And it was only after the case was over and after I retired that we became friends. And I came to realize that Dan had debilitating PTSD. And it was triggered in large part by what he went through in this investigation and how stressful it was to him. And so whether you're a first responder and you're in a dangerous environment and seeing just shockingly heartbreaking things every single night you go to work, or you're a sailor who was on a ship that came under attack and you had to try to recover from that and save your shipmates, or somebody like Dan, you know, the triggers are very different. But what I've seen that I think really helps people is, number one, knowing that people care about what they're going through, knowing that there are people out there who can identify with what they're feeling and experiencing, and knowing that there are people who want to help them. That's what I saw in Dan as being helpful to him. And that's what I've seen in other folks, that when they know that they have somebody they can talk to, who's not going to be judgmental, who is welcoming them, who wants to help them, I think that's what I've seen help.
Yeah. Well, before I pass to Gigi, I just want to give you my perspective, what I've seen. Yeah. And I mean, I'm a Christian and a spiritual guy. So I look into the spiritual, I'm not a doctor or something like that, but I really investigate this very deeply. And I discover a few things. This is real facts with real people, special children, and even children has these problems as well. Trauma is something that opens something in you that you have never experienced. So trauma changes you, and let's say at the Christian language, exposes you to evil forces, let's say this way. And this is my perspective as the Christian, as I said to you, right? What doctors have seen that medicines make things worse. And I researched about this, and medicines actually can make the person suicidal. I've seen this with kids, with adults and stuff like that. So it looks like when you experience trauma, you start being tormented somehow, and that leads you to suicide, could lead you. But even the like Prozac and Celexa and all these kind of medicines can actually make things worse. So maybe the counseling is better than the medicines. I'm just throwing this out there. But when people goes to medicines, they start to experience hate, suicide, like you said, mutilation, sometimes murder, depression, fear, torments, madness, anxiety. And I think the medicines potential all this. So I've seen this with a very friend of mine, the husband of a friend of mine, that he was completely destroyed and get into all sorts of problems, mental problems. And as he put more Prozac, use more Prozac and all this kind of stuff, he getting worse and worse and worse. So that's my first comment. Okay, this is real things, right? And the second thing, I think this is a more spiritual problem, because trauma in let's say in the spiritual language opens a portal in you for evil forces. And for me, PTSD is a kind of a possession, sometimes because you have been faced with so tremendous, atrocious acts. Sometimes you are in war, you have been facing death every day. The fear is a very real thing that destroys you. The fear, the pressure, and the devil is all over it. So I believe we have been addressing this as of course, it's a physical condition, but I think there is a spiritual part that we need to deal with it, because we are not ready for trauma. Man is not ready for extreme conditions and extreme evil and extreme death and war and stuff like that. And that scenarios, I think, will open the man to something that is not prepared to, if that makes sense. So you can comment my comment, or otherwise we can skip, but that's my vision about this, if that makes sense.
I'd like to interject something here briefly. I listened to an ER doctor yesterday talk about PTSD, anxiety, depression, all the things that are affecting people in a more pronounced way as we enter the holidays. And she said, basically, we're the same people we were 10,000 years ago. But back then, the only dangers we faced were saber-toothed tigers, not bills, not politics, not family members at the dinner table over the holidays. And she said, we have that fight or flight. And what she was saying, the best way to counteract any of these conditions that you just touched on, Armando, was through prayer, through exercise, through deep breathing. And everything we have is already in us. We don't need to go outside. But, some people do, and we're not judging anyone who goes to a doctor or a psychologist or psychiatrist and gets that medication. We're just, these are our views. And Gigi, I'd love to hear from you, since you're the founder of Life Services International, and you one of the things that you deal with and treat and help people with are depression, anxiety, and PTSD.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. And so Life Service Center of America, it has two aspects. It has our professional coaching services, and then it also has the business service navigator, which allows our members to locate the services that they need in a reasonable time. But then also we host several events throughout the year on various topics, such as leadership topics, business topics, and survivor topics as well. And so essentially God led me to do one on domestic violence and sexual assault, topics that I'm a survivor of. But then he also led me to do it on topics such as breast cancer, mental health topics, pregnancy, you name it. And so I just stepped into purpose, understanding what God needed me to do. And Mindy has been a part of some of our events, as well as Armando. Grateful for both of you as well. And when we talk about trauma tends to come up quite a bit in those conversations as far as those survivors events go, and mental health. And so it's so important to have those discussions about trauma. And so I want to circle back to what Armando said there in regards to trauma, and also understanding, Mindy, that you and we recently launched a book titled Overcoming Heart Blocks, Inspiring Stories for Healing from Trauma, with other individuals who come forward about their own heart blocks. And so my question for Tony is, why do you believe that some folks are in fear to come forward in regards to their heart block that may stem from trauma? And also, if they are aware, why aren't they talking more about it?
You know, it's not just PTSD. I mean, you see people who have medical afflictions who don't go get treatment, right? There'll be people who have chest pain and they don't want to go to the doctor. And ultimately that chest pain becomes a heart attack, and maybe they recover from it and maybe they don't. I mean, people look at problems differently. Some recognize them and choose to deal with them. Some recognize them and choose to ignore them, and some don't recognize them, right? So we're all different as human beings. I think one of the things that we as a society need to do is to emphasize to these people that the stigma isn't there anymore. They don't have to be worried about what people are going to think of them just because they have PTSD. We want them to recognize it. We want them to come forward. We want them to address it, and we want to help them do it. And I think the better job we do with getting that word out, spreading it far and wide, shouting it from the mountaintops, the better off we're going to be as a society, because hopefully we can convince those people not to stifle it, not to shove it in a box, not to push it down inside themselves. Come open up about it. There are people out there that care, you know. Let's let them know that so they can come find one of us and talk to us.
Very powerful.
I heard something recently said, don't be judgmental unless you're making a decision. Oh, that was on your that was your guest, Gigi.
Which one?
The one that has the horse therapy.
Eliza, Miss Buss.
Yeah, Miss Buss. And I thought, wow, that is such a simplistic view. And hopefully that'll keep us out of judging others. Also, Tony, I like what you said. You know, we're all different. We've all got different backgrounds. We've been raised differently. We've been coddled and nurtured differently. I think that makes a huge difference as to whether or not you're willing to step forward and ask for help if you feel you need it. Some people feel like, I don't want to be a burden. Other people just want to pretend it doesn't exist. But I also saw a billboard in my hometown that said every year thousands of men die from stubbornness, and it was a heart disease. It was a Heart Foundation advertisement, because, you know, men are the strong types. They don't want to be, you know, they don't want to call attention to their themselves or their pain. So I think we have to have that self-care and say, okay, I'm needing help. And especially as we go into this holiday season, it just magnifies emotions, or it can really bring up and dredge old emotions that we haven't quite dealt with.
Right. You know, I'm a workaholic. I mean, that's how I am. Left to my own devices, I would do nothing but work. And if I did, and I know that that's bad, right? But if I didn't have people around me who helped me, you know, who pointed that out to me, I would still do it. And I think I'm a fairly intelligent guy. I mean, I'm certainly not the smartest person in a room ever, but, you know, but I know it's wrong, right? I know I shouldn't do it, but I need help. I need people to remind me, hey, take a break. Hey, do something that you enjoy. Read something for fun instead of for work. Sit down and watch a show. Sit down and watch a game. You know, and I think to some, there are people who are not like that at all, right? But I think everybody, you know, you can be smart, you can be savvy, you can be experienced, and you still need help sometimes, you know?
I think there are probably people that someone should go, get up off the couch, go for a walk, turn off the TV.
Yeah, and I think that's that's a good aspect. I think it's a humbleness, right? I think for people to be helped, they need to desire to be helped. They need to desire the desire to come out of it. I think I learned to a mentor of mine that say, don't help people that don't want to be helped, because you're going to lose your time. Because if you're not, position yourself to come out of that bad situation, if you don't desire it, you're open to it, it's very hard to change a person's heart, right? So you need to have that desire to come out of that problem. Does that make sense? If you have that, I think you can make it, right? If that makes sense.
I think you have to be willing, whatever that is.
Exactly.
Like Tony said, it took somebody close to him in his sphere of influence to point out, hey, you need to engage, you need to be more present. And that was a twofold, because you also enhanced probably relationships, but it was a way for you to take care of yourself and step back.
I also believe that a person that is in the environment of love, in a family environment, it can help a lot. Love can heal a lot of problems and a lot of emotional and this type of problems, because I think because of the intense shock and trauma that these people have been involved with, sometimes they need to be nurtured as well. They give a lot. They gave a lot of themselves. They gave a lot of their time, of their lives, and they need love back. So care back, as Tony was saying. You need to come out and ask for help, and there is people willing to be your friend and help you. So I think that gesture it's a very good step for people to understand there is out there people willing to help. So
I think that's right, but I'm going to take it one step further. The people that are willing to reach out, and the people that recognize their problems, and the ones that are willing to ask for help, they're the easy ones to help, right? We all want to help them. The challenge is, what do you do when you find somebody that has that issue, but they don't want your help? Those are the ones that are challenging. And that's where I think it falls on us to be patient and to be loving and to recognize that, okay, this isn't going to be easy, but the person still needs help, right? I'll never forget running a call once as a paramedic on this woman who was in a domestic violence situation, and she'd been beaten up by her spouse or boyfriend, whatever. And it was the third time that I personally had run a 911 call on that woman. And I said to her, what's wrong with you? I'm one of 100 paramedics in the 911 system in this city. And so I know that others have run calls on you as well. How many times does this have to happen? And I was young, and I was stupid, and I was stubborn, and I was cynical, and I didn't realize that at that point, it's really more on me, right? Because I know she needs help, and I took the view that, well, if she doesn't want help, what can I do for her? But the answer is, that's where we have to be Christians, right? That's where we have to do God's work for him as the people on the ground, because that woman, she needed patience, and she needed understanding, and she needed love, even if she didn't know it, and even if she didn't want it. And unfortunately, I was too young and stupid to realize it. The question now, as I get older and maybe get a little bit smarter, is how do I do a better job of helping the people that aren't yet in a position where they're willing to ask for it? I think that's the challenge.
Have you figured that out yet, Tony? Because I could use some of that too.
A good friend of mine once said it's all about meeting people where they are.
Yeah.
Sure. Armando, what are your thoughts?
Well, as a Christian, I know we need to bring God to these situations. God is love, right? So God is not about love is not a thing, is a person, right? And I think we need all to meet Jesus as the Son of God. So I believe if we have, we let, I mean, the word of love is the word of God, right? So as I think most of these problems, and I believe words can change. I mean, I give a funny example, right? If I say to my wife, of course, today I'm married, right? So I say, hey, I love you. That creates some emotion in her, right? Maybe I cannot forget that, right? I need to tell it her. I always telling her all the time, but words, God sent his word and he saved us from our destructions. And I think we need to bring the word of God into these problems. And we need to tell people there's only one guy that can help you, this Jesus Christ. Nothing is impossible with God. You guys agree with me? So whatever we do, if we are with God, our chances to succeed is multiplied by 1,000, right? So if we try to do alone, we have a certain success and percentage of success, and we can measure that by science. But if we bring the supernatural power of God, that I've seen working many times, I've helped a lot of people with madness, including people that don't even know their names. And they sit right in front of me, completely clear-minded when Jesus comes in, right? So I think we need to understand we are dealing with forces and powers because of trauma. Trauma opens that door that we need to understand. It's beyond what we know physically. We are used to see the three-dimensional world, but there is a fourth dimension that most of the people ignore all their lives. And we need to understand we are a spirit, and there are other spirits, and there is the spirit of God also that help us to be strong and can make supernatural things happen that I cannot do and any of us can do. So to finalize my thought, I believe we need to bring God back to everything, not only to PSD, to schools, to the society, forgiveness, love. You know, once you come into this kingdom of God that Jesus say, the kingdom of God is here. If you enter in that kingdom, everything is possible. So just want to say that. Sorry. Yeah, next.
Gigi, I want to take just a moment and have you tell us about your second annual gala that you are involved in tonight, and then we'll go back to Tony. But tell us a little bit about that, and what will you be celebrating?
Great question. We'll be celebrating all things LSCOA, which includes our LSCOA speakers. That includes you as well, and Armando. You all are LSCOA speakers. You've spoken on our platform before. And I'm just grateful for everyone who's come out this year and the previous years before that. I'm just grateful for our team members as well and our sponsors. My goodness, I can't tell you enough. I'm just grateful. Much gratitude.
So you're the founder of Life Services Center International, and you're also a speaker and an author. In fact, if anyone's interested in any of these speakers for an event or stage coming up in the new year, you can contact me, Mindy, at Barren Ridge Productions with an S.com, and I'll be happy to make all those arrangements for you. But Gigi, tell us a little bit. I know we're going to be getting off here in a few minutes before we end up with Tony closing comments, but Gigi, what are your goals for this 2023 new year?
Absolutely, to continue to serve others. And I'm just grateful for the ministry, and I understand God's purpose for my life. If you're listening to this message today and you understand God's purpose for your life, make sure that you're in tune with it and that you step into purpose. And if there's something that God's put on your heart and you've put it off to the side, I encourage you to circle back to it today. Circle back to it. There's a reason why he led you to it. And if he leads you to it, he will get you through it. And then also too, I want to circle back to what Tony said in regards to suicide, because the rate is very, very high. And as we know, it went even higher during COVID. And so when we talk about suicide, especially for those folks that are listening in today, Tony, what would you tell someone who may be experiencing that right now, someone that has gone through the experience of suicide or is thinking of suicide?
Talk to somebody. Go talk to somebody right now. People want to help you. If you go tell somebody what you're thinking, I guarantee you they're going to help you. All you have to do is say something. Please say something.
I don't think we reach out quite enough. And, it's so important for us to be connected and engaged. So it's wonderful advice.
Yeah. And the flip side of that, Gigi, is if you know somebody that you think is struggling, just check in with them. I just today, I have a friend, he's an agent. We worked on some really complex, significant cases today. In the last 3 months, he's lost a daughter, and now his dad is terminally ill.
Oh.
And I know that he needs his friends right now. He needs us to call and check in on him. He needs just to have a conversation and take his mind off it. And then another buddy and we're going to take him fishing as soon as the weather gets warm, because that's his, that's what sustains and fulfills him. And we're just going to grab him and make him go. Sometimes, he's one of those people that I'm not convinced that he's willing to ask for help when he needs it. But I'm comfortable enough with him to make him take the help when I think he needs it.
And, that's what Gigi was saying, meet people
Where they are.
where they are.
Yeah.
And find out where their happy place is. If
Mhm.
it's fishing, if it's a coffee shop, like me, if it's on the seasonal decorating aisle of Hobby Lobby, then it's all good. It's all good. Armando, closing comments from you.
Yeah, I think what Tony said is the key of everything we are talking about here is you take others important, and if they feel important, I think it helps them to not focus on the bad things, right? And I think one of the important thing here is remind these people when you go talk with these people, what's the purpose of life, right? Why are they here, and why are they living this life? And make sure that before you leave, they understand that life is more important than anything else, and they still have time, and they still have the purpose that God put in their hearts to fulfill. And sometimes, we go through hard situations. I was trained as a military to go these type of things, but I've learned that you can handle so much, right? And the friendship and the friends and the group of friends can help you a lot. And if if you can just pass a message to these people, is to tell them, like, you still have time to do great things. Remember that as long as you have time, besides the fact you're going through this problems, everything will have an end. Problems also have ends, right? So you can always build from there. You can build starting that point, and it's never late. So I think that thoughts will fight the thoughts that they have in their heads, maybe of depression, of suicide and stuff like that. We need to substitute those thoughts by new thoughts of hope, of that something good is about to happen. And I think that could help a lot, a person to, at least if it's a point to terminate their life, for example, or at the point that they are in the extreme point, words and love and like I said, pay attention, go fishing, go do something to kind of come out of that dark cloud. I think that can help a lot. So that's what I would say.
So Mindy, one of the things that I learned from Dan Day, when I met Dan, I misjudged him as a person. I misunderstood his motivations, and I underestimated him. And one of the things that I learned from him is everybody can be a hero. Every single person can be a hero. You have to have the courage, and you have to lead through your own actions. But every single person has the ability to go out and make somebody else's life better. And that's what I would encourage everybody who's watching and everybody who's listening to do. Have the courage to lead through your own example, your own actions. Go be a hero and make somebody else's life better.
Oh, that's a beautiful sentiment. It's so true. And I have a cute little story. I try every day to do something nice for someone else. And especially if they're a stranger. I'd like to be a little hero in someone else's life. And I was at Panera this morning, meeting a client, and the guy in front of me was having difficulty, with his card going through. So I said, here, let me just get that for you. Well, I didn't realize he was buying for his entire office.
So you weren't just a hero, Mindy, you were a really, really big
I
hero.
mean, I was like, they applauded me. Anyway, I said, no, that's fine. And for some reason, his card wouldn't go through. But then he said, well, let me buy yours. I told him, I said, I try to do something nice every day for somebody, especially a stranger. And he goes, well, let me pay you back. And so he bought, we had 2 cups of hot tea. And so he paid for those. A little fun exchange. And it didn't break my bank. It was $34. But anyway, that was just funny. But I appreciate you guys, all of you, so much. And I'm so grateful for you that you're in my agency. You bring so much to my life and to Barron Ridge. And I just want to thank each and every one of you. And Gigi and Armando and I will be back next week with our guest, Seth Holhouse of Man in America. He's got his own show on YouTube, I believe. And then Tony, you and I have, you're a guest on my upcoming TV show, Ageless Enthusiasm with PBS Kansas. And we'll get that all edited, and you'll be on after the first of the year. So
I'm a little nervous about being on TV. You know what they say about, I'm a guy who has a face for radio, right? So I'm a little bit nervous about you having me on TV, Mindy, but it was fun to film that. It was fun to record that, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
It was a lot of fun, and you had some great content, and so appreciate you sharing about Dan Day today, and thank you all for your insight and perspective on PTSD. And don't forget, Gigi and Armando's books are on Amazon, and Gigi's event is on at what time? This
5 p.m. Eastern.
I'm sorry?
5 p.m. Eastern.
5 p.m. Eastern this evening. And what's your website again?
Life Service Center of America, LLC.com.
Okay, very good. And we will just close out and say, everyone have a blessed and wonderful weekend. And thank you all for your time. And remember, freedom is everybody's job. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Mindy.
Take care, guys. God bless you.